Hello, I was eating breakfast this morning. Some melon from Spain, satsumas from South Africa, and a banana from Costa Rica. And of course, tea, probably grown in both Africa and India. Such variety got me thinking about something called food miles. The fact that we can eat food that is grown and produced from all over the world has been facilitated by both refrigeration and by globalization. As a consequence, our diet has become much more varied. Food that was once considered exotic, like avocados, are now very common in your local supermarket. In fact, it was not so long ago, before you were born, but not before I was born, that the food we bought in the UK was quite seasonal. Certain foods were only available at certain times of the year, depending on what was grown and harvested locally. As I said, that's now changed completely. Walk into any supermarket or market, and it's possible to buy pretty much any food that you like. This availability of food from all over the world led to this term food miles, which refers to the distance that any food travels from producer to consumer. For example, bananas usually originate in countries like Latin America, Costa Rica, Ecuador. Lamb is often imported from New Zealand, that sort of thing. The term food miles was coined by Professor Tim Lang in a report called The Food Miles Report, The Dangers of Long Distance Food Travel. It was published in 1994. As the title suggests, food miles is the subject of some debate regarding climate change and pollution caused by transporting food all over the world. So I'll look at the effects of this, both positive and negative. So I think there are two positive things to come out of transporting varieties of food. The first is choice. Consumers nowadays want choice, and imported food gives us a year-round choice of different things. Secondly, it's health. We've got so many different fruits and vegetables available all year round. It's good for our health. We have a much more balanced diet. The negatives were first discussed in the publication I just mentioned, the dangers of long-distance food transport from 1994. And there are two main disadvantages. The first, as you might have guessed, is the environmental problem. A lot of carbon dioxide, CO2, is produced when transporting all of this food from country to country. The second problem is slightly more complex. Most of us now shop in supermarkets, and as the supermarkets have more choice in where to source their food from, so they have more ability to negotiate lower prices with their suppliers. Let's look at an example. We'll take strawberries. Some years ago, strawberries in the UK were only sold in the summer, and they were grown in Britain. Then the bigger supermarkets realised that the consumer could enjoy strawberries all year round if the strawberries were imported from Southern Europe and North Africa. The supermarkets then realised that it was actually cheaper to buy these strawberries from Southern Europe and North Africa all year, so the consumer then had a choice in the summer: buy British for a higher price or buy the imported ones at a cheaper price. We have choice, lots of choice, and that same choice applies to many other foods. As I said, supermarkets negotiate prices with suppliers. If they guarantee to buy a certain quantity of strawberries each year, they can negotiate the price of those strawberries down, and this negotiation generally leads to lower profits for the producer and a more competitive price for the consumer. That's a very simplified picture of the issue. You can see the same issues with, for example, milk in the UK. Farmers producing the milk from the cows, sell the milk at a very, very small profit margin to the supermarkets because of the purchasing power of the supermarkets. Now, if that's a problem in the UK, think about how much worse it might be in a more developing country. The supermarkets could bankrupt suppliers if they suddenly stopped buying from them. So that threat is always going to drive down prices, which again affects the profitability of the producers. Now, one interesting result of this price squeezing by the big supermarkets is a movement called fair trade. You see this on coffee, tea, many other food products. It's an organisation that was founded in 1997, and it's fair trade certified food means that what you buy has been produced to a minimum standard of economic, social, and environmental factors, and that helps to ensure the long-term success of the farmers and producers. Fair trade's been around since 1997, and Liu in 2021 reports that fair trade now accounts for 1.7 million farmers in 72 different countries, producing 35,000 fair trade certified products. Now that seems like a lot, but actually it accounts for less than 1% of the 570 million smallholder farms worldwide. And there are some criticisms of fair trade. For example, Melissa Sevi in 2023, writing in the Forbes magazine, questions a lot of the benefits that fair trade is supposed to give these farms. But let's get back to food miles. As I said, in order to provide a wide range of foods, particularly fruit, at competitive prices, supermarkets buy from overseas. Perishable food that has a short shelf life, may even travel by plane to ensure the food stays fresh. Air travel produces a heck of a lot of CO2, which is very harmful to the environment. The second problem, this price squeezing by supermarkets also means that although producers are selling more, they are selling more at a reduced profit, which is not so good for them. So those, in a nutshell, are the two problems. Let's turn to the solutions now to the environmental problem. Firstly, supermarkets have, in the UK at least, have begun to promote food that is grown in the UK. In fact, my local Member of Parliament, Dr. Luke Evans, campaigned in 2023 for UK supermarkets to do more to promote homegrown foods. Now, as a result of his campaign, most major supermarkets in the UK have dedicated sections of UK grown and produced food. The president of the National Farmers Union confirmed that independent research shows that the general public in the UK want to buy more British food from retailers. So what the supermarkets have done there is actually marketed British food in a slightly new way to make even more money. The second solution isn't really a solution. It's just another way of looking at the problem of environmental damage caused by agriculture and transporting food. And New Zealand is a very good example of this. Much of the food grown in New Zealand is grown for export. It has a very small population, just over 5 million people, but plenty of good agricultural land. Now, as New Zealand is on the other side of the world from the UK, you would expect products from there to have a high environmental impact, lots of CO2 emissions because of the transport. However, a paper by Lincoln University in New Zealand suggests that this is not actually the case, and they explain with 3 examples of typical food: milk, lamb, and apples. So according to these researchers, the UK uses twice as much energy per tonne of milk solids produced compared to New Zealand. Secondly, the energy used in producing lamb in the UK is 4 times higher than the energy used by the New Zealand lamb producers, even after you include the energy used in transporting the New Zealand lamb to the UK. Thus, the New Zealand CO2 emissions are considerably lower than those in the UK with regards to lamb production. And a final example, New Zealand is also more efficient in producing and delivering apples to the UK than the UK is at growing and delivering apples to itself. New Zealand energy costs for the production of apples, growing them, picking them, are a third of those in the UK. Even when transport is added, New Zealand energy costs are approximately 60% of those in the UK. Now, that paper is over 100 pages long and contains lots and lots of statistics to support the claims, which are very surprising. So, maybe it's not as clear-cut as saying to yourself, oh, this food has travelled a long way, therefore I will not buy it. It may actually be more environmentally friendly. To conclude, the concept of food miles gained a lot of interest in the late 1990s and is still debated today. It is clearly a source of CO2 emissions, but maybe not as much as we might think. And as I just said, importing food might even have lower CO2 emissions because some countries can produce food with lower pollution levels than the home country can. The second problem is the price squeezing of the suppliers in developing countries. The Fair Trade Organization has, to some extent, alleviated some of those issues and allows those farmers to earn a living wage and invest in their futures. Thank you.